Hi, Biggie. We're back in Marina del Rey, and the sun is out, man. It's a good day today.
Yeah, it's actually beautiful here. It's the weather is probably in the 60s, I'd say, maybe, and a little breeze. And,
I like it.
Sun is shining, and definitely a nice little background here. And it's nice to be outside breathing some fresh air.
That's right.
For sure.
You got some good questions this week?
Yeah, so I got some good questions. One question I got, which I've gotten this before, but I think it's still always good to answer. For any clients that you have, do you ever prescribe cheat meals strategically to jolt the metabolism or to instill new growth? That's a good question. By prescribe, this is pretty much something that I interpret as meaning, do I basically build it into their plan? So for instance, if we're going to do a 16-week contest prep program, do I say, okay, you can have cheat meals once a week or whatever, that kind of thing, then I'm prescribing it as part of the plan? And my answer to that is definitely no. I do not prescribe it as part of a plan, whether it be, contest prep or building muscle. This is something that I deal with on a client-to-client basis. And this is why I require my clients, whether it be preparing for a show or even in the off season, or at least I encourage as best I can to have them send me pictures weekly if it's before a contest, or bi-weekly if it's in the off season, because I need to see what's happening with their physique. Now, obviously, I'm not going to say too much about off season training, because really cheat meals, people in general are a little bit less disciplined during progress season, and that's okay, because in that period of time they may not be focused so much on keeping body fat so low. They want to build muscle. So I think in general, I think it's okay to have a cheat meal maybe once a week in the progress season, depending on how far. Some people's progress season is only 3 months. Some people take a whole year, so you have to also think of it in those terms. But when you're trying to build muscle, there's nothing wrong with obviously throwing in a cheat meal now and again. Just good for your mind. It's good for the body. But more strategically for contest prep, again, this is something that I couldn't really give you a blanket statement about. I have to see what a person looks like now. Are they starting their contest preparation 10 pounds away from their projected contest weight, or are they starting 40 pounds away from their weight? Now, of course, I will offset this somewhat. Like if I have a client that stays in great shape year round, I might say we only need a 10-week prep before the show. If they don't really stay in great shape, I might say, hey, we need 24 weeks before the show. So that's one thing. The second thing is that, again, I won't prescribe the cheat meals. I'll look at their physique. I'll see, are we on schedule? Are we ahead of schedule? Are we behind schedule? And I will take that into consideration. Obviously, if we're ahead of schedule, I might say, hey, you know what? Have a free meal this weekend. Go out on Saturday night. Don't weigh anything. Have some of your favorite foods. Enjoy, and then just go right back on your diet. And again, also if they're pretty much on time, I may say that as well. If they're behind schedule, hell no, I'm not going to give them a cheat meal. That's just not going to happen, because that's counterproductive. It's going to push them further behind. I do believe there is some use in cheat meals for situations where people plateau sometimes. If they're, let's just say they started their prep 16 weeks out, everything's going great. We hit 10 weeks out, they look great. But 9 weeks out, they still kind of look the same. 8 weeks out, they kind of look the same. Sometimes I feel that the best way to progress is not necessarily saying, oh, let's throw in tons more cardio or try to force the progression. Sometimes a cheat meal will actually, if the body always tries to remain in homeostasis. So if you're doing well in your contest prep and you're on a certain amount of calories, the body may finally catch on to this and say, well, I'm going to slow the metabolism down enough so that we are going to stay right where we're at, so it adapts. Sometimes when you throw a cheat meal in with a lot of calories, it will stimulate the thyroid to start activating again, the metabolism will activate again, and you'll again start burning more calories. So I can't give you an exact answer. I'll just say I do not prescribe cheat meals. I take it client to client basis, depending on where they are in their progress. And of course, this goes by their body weight, body fat percentage, and what they're looking like to me in pictures. If you're training yourself, do not use cheat meals just as an excuse. Don't just use them just because you think it's a great idea and you hear other people use them. Make sure you use them at the right time for the right reasons. And if you're not doing well in your prep, don't throw them in until you've tried to at least do more cardio or lower your calories further or take further steps to see if you can make progress to happen a little bit faster.
Awesome.
Okay, so this question, pretty simple question, but some people might find it useful in their own training. I was asked about behind the neck shoulder press. Not whether it's a good exercise or not, but just basically is it best to incorporate this on shoulder day or back day? Now this might seem obvious to experienced lifters when to incorporate this movement because really it is primarily a shoulder movement. Yes, the upper back muscles will come into play, especially in the negative portion of the rep, but they'll act more as stabilizers, more so than the active movers of the weight, which will really come from the anterior deltoids, some of the lateral deltoids, and even some of the upper chest. So really this is a shoulder movement and should be incorporated on shoulder day. While I'm talking behind the neck press, let me just say a couple of things about it. For some people, this is a great movement. For some people who do not have good shoulder mobility, it's not such a great movement. It can cause problems for some people. I don't think that any exercise in of itself is a bad exercise. A lot of people will say the bench press or upright rows or certain movements that might be hard on the joints or impinge the joints, that they're bad movements. For some people they are. For some people they're not. For some people they become better movements if they warm up properly. Sometimes if you don't warm up well and stretch the rotators and warm up the rotator cuffs, the behind the neck press can hurt. But if you do proper warm up before in preparation, it could be a great movement. Another thing is overuse injuries. There are certain I wouldn't use any movement over and over and over again in training every single week, 1 week after the week, because any movement can produce an overuse injury. So if you're basically attacking the muscles and the joints and the skeletal system the same exact way over and over again, even if it's not a bad movement, even if your form is good, you can have an overuse injury. And I think this is seen more with behind the neck movements like upright rows and even like bench press. So basically, as long as you do it carefully, take the time to warm up. If your shoulder mobility is good, the behind the neck press can be a great movement, as it has been for many, many years, for building shoulder muscle in the front and side delts. And yes, use it during your shoulder workouts, not your back workouts.
Okay, Vicky, so I got one for you. So obviously right now people know goals is closed, and so we've kind of been separated from the training for a while. You're actually in Bakersfield during the week. You come back over here on the weekend so we can see each other. And I've actually been training with Joe from Project AD at Kathy's gym and stuff, and it's been really kind of different for me because it's I kind of sort of adopting his training style. When we first started training together, he says, hey, you want to do what I do? I'm like, you know what, that's fine. I'll just I know it's temporary, and I was like, it's always good to try something new. And so I started training with him, which is much, much more high volume. And it's funny because I'm just not used to it. So this is like the third or fourth week we're going to get into it with him, and I'm finally catching on and stuff. But I'm really realizing the differences between the training protocol, the training. And so it kind of made me think about this. A lot of people are asking, even to Jay, what he thinks are the Dorian way of training, which was heavy duty, not that many reps, not that many sets, just full out, versus what Jay was doing, example, which is a lot of high volume and stuff. And obviously it works for both. But I was just wondering, I've been training since I'm 18 years old now. Yeah, so I've tried a lot of different things, and I like it because it allows you to form your own opinion of what works best for you. And I'm realizing now that I'm training a much higher volume that the older I get, the tougher it is to train that way. Because I'm not someone who's very strong, but I can go high rep a lot. That's the way my body. I'm a repper. Yeah. So, what do you think? Obviously, I'm sure you'll think that your method is one of the better one because you perfected over the years and stuff. What do you think about the way Dorian trained versus, example, the way Jay trained, as far as high volume versus low volume? And can you, because they're like two, very well-known Mr. Olympia elite athlete. What do you think between those two way of training? And what do you think, if you had to pick between the two, which one would you rather use, or which one do you think would be the best one?
Well, I think I wish this was obvious, but it really isn't that obvious to a lot of people. And I think it's very, very important to say this before I even answer the question. But when you're talking about people like Jay and Dorian, Ronnie, Phil, Sergio,
the elite, yeah,
you're talking about people who have literally some of the most elite, incredible genetics on earth for building muscle. These guys, and this pretty much goes for most of the guys who have reached professional level, because look, I mean, let's forget about what's happening now with all these pro cards being handed out, but years ago when it was much harder to get a pro card,
10 years on average,
yeah,
to get pro
I mean,
status,
so many people would look, I mean, Dave Hughes just got his pro card at age 53, so it used to take a lot longer, especially when we're talking about bodybuilding. So, as opposed to classic physique and men's physique and those ones that are, I think, a little easier to get in terms of the fact that you don't have to build as much muscle mass, which takes longer to build. But we're talking about people with elite genetics, and I don't really think you can count them in this equation because, honestly, I think if Jay trained, now he may not have enjoyed it, but let's just say Jay hooked up with Dorian and trained with him for a while. I have a feeling Jay would probably look pretty much like Jay, even if he did. And if Dorian hooked up with Jay and trained his style, I think Dorian probably would have ended up looking like Dorian. And this is because, there are certain people in this world who are just so genetically gifted, and we like to joke about it, say they look at a weight and they grow. And it's just like anything else. I mean, there's people who pick up a basketball and they shoot it, and they couldn't come close to the basket to save their lives, and somebody just picks up a basketball and they're shooting free throws like it's nothing, and they've never even touched it before. Or an instrument, some people have never taken a guitar lesson, they pick it up and they start playing. This goes for everything. So you can't really count them because they're the elite. So let me answer the question more to the average, and I'm going to put myself average, I'll put you average, I'll put 99% of the people that in that average area, what do I think is better? And I think, first of all, I will say this, and I always like to say this. If you are somebody who is using high volume, which is not my style, where you don't really necessarily go to failure, you kind of just get a really good pump, you use a lot of sets, you train fast, you might be doing 25, 30 sets for a body part, that type of style, and you are making progress, and that progress is continual, and you like the way you look, and you think you do, forget about everything I'm saying. Just keep doing what you're doing. I have no argument. I can't say, no, that doesn't work if it's working. That would be stupid. But I'm going to base this answer on what I've been doing this, and I don't just mean myself. I've been doing this for 30 plus years in terms of training clients, coaching clients, and, in person, online, every level, from beginner all the way up to somebody training 1 year, 2, 3, 4, up to elite athletes. And I've tried different training styles myself, and I've tried, because there was years I went through a lot of experimentation to get to where I'm at now. I didn't just, my first books that I read were, the Joe Weider Principles, Arnold's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, and they weren't talking about low volume Dorian training or rep tempos and this and that like I do. So I just followed that. Then, as time went by and I saw my progress, I was doing well, and I saw it slowing down, I said, maybe there's more to this than just going in there and lifting the weights. And that's when I started experimenting, and I came up with Power Ripper and Shock, my first training program. And I started saying, what happens if I control the negative more? What happens if I control the positive more? What happens if, do I need to be in the gym 3 hours doing so many sets? Let me see what happens if I do less. So I experimented. And then when I became a personal trainer, because I can't just use myself, as any scientist would not be able to use himself as the only example. They do experiments, and they have a population. So I've had a population of thousands of clients like I said, all different levels, and I would sort of use them as human guinea pigs in the best possible way. I would try cycles of higher volume with them. I would try cycles of lower volume. I'd try more, intensity training to failure every set. I would try, the negative. I'd try everything. And without answering this question over a 3-hour period, the conclusion I came to is that most people seem to respond optimally or better. Not that they don't respond at all to the other training methods, because they do, but optimally, which is what we're after, I find that people do better with lower volume. Now, I don't necessarily mean Menser, where he was like 4 sets per body part, 1 exercise, 4 exercises, 1 set each to failure.
Yeah.
I've tried that. Didn't work that well. But I'm talking about volume and where you're talking about, 8 to 10 sets per muscle group at the most. Every set is to failure. Always using strict form. Only cheating could come at the end of a set, like with barbell curls to get a little momentum, that kind of stuff. And then from there, I started implementing what happens if you hold the stretch position, the contracted position, negative, positive. And I learned about scientifically what these effects on the muscle were, so I read studies as well. And I found that people respond better to that on a whole, including myself, because, now I'm in my 50s. I am bigger than I have ever been in my life. Maybe a little smaller now after the quarantine, but I'll get back.
That doesn't count.
But I'm bigger than I've ever been. I'm still gaining muscle. You holding the camera, Dave, you started my training methods and your body completely changed. I've had professionals who said, oh my God, yes, they're elite. They've used high volume, and then they try my methods and they go, oh my God, I've never felt my muscles before like I feel them now. I've always just kind of felt my joints, and now I feel my muscle, then using half the weight and half the volume. And it just seems to be across the board. Forget about pure beginners, but people who've been training for a few years, that they respond better to this form of training. And I find 2 other things. Not only do they gain more muscle, their joints tend to keep in better shape. There's less injuries because there's just less overall pounding, less volume of pounding. And 2, they're often in the gym for a lot shorter periods of time. So to me, I think it's great if you can go into the gym. Like Dorian used to say, I'm in and out of the gym in 45 minutes. Mm-hmm. If you can go to the gym and work out for 45 minutes to an hour, and even if your results are exactly the same as working out for 2 to 3 hours, I'd rather be in the gym and working out for an hour. Yeah. So I just think, to answer the question, again, I don't want to go on for 3 hours. I should write a book on this, in my opinion. But I personally feel that for the average community, forget about the professionals. Ronnie is an alien. Jay is an alien. Phil is an alien. Dorian, they're aliens. For the general population, I do feel that a lower volume, higher intensity approach with long time under tension will work best for, in the long run, building more muscle, keeping injuries away, and having a longer career in the sport or the activity of lifting.
I'm glad you said that, but also you touched on something briefly as you were talking. You said, when people first started to get into the gym, what you're teaching, a lot of time we always assume that people have been training for years and years, but a lot of time people have not. So sometimes some of the comments are, well, Dorian never trained like that, or this guy. So when we do get started in the gym, this is not, you don't want to hit someone over the head with slow negative and slow positive, and they don't need to, because no matter what they'll do, they'll progress on it. This is something that comes later. Yes. What would you say the amount of time of them training basically with anything should kick in for, let's say someone's just getting started and say, okay, I'm going to train, let's say, give me like 6 months or a year, and then I can start incorporating some of those methods.
Yeah, I think that's actually a pretty good time. I think, like in the beginning, I think the most important point is learning proper form,
basics,
proper technique, learning the basics, and learning to use free weights properly, incorporating some machines, and progressing either by reps or weight in the same form. I think that's important. I think after about a year, and I don't mean a year where you train for a few weeks and then you stop.
No, consistently.
A consistent year, you've been pounding it for a year, you're dedicated, you love it. I think then you could start to incorporate some of the techniques. Okay. But then I think that once you hit I'm going to say, and again, it's hard for me to make a blanket statement because everybody's a little different, but I'm just going to give you a generalization. I think once you've hit about 3 to 5 years is when you can really go full force into using the techniques that I prescribe.
So you would say 0 to 1 year beginner, 1 to 3 years intermediate, and over 3 to 5 years expert or advanced.
I think about 2 to 4 years of lifting is where you're like sort of intermediate.
Okay.
And then when you hit 5 years, I think straight, you're pretty advanced.
More advanced. Okay.
More advanced.
Gotcha. Okay, that's a good
And
timeline.
I think that would give you a pretty good timeline. And I think that once you hit that 5-year mark, you could use my techniques pretty much every single week. And there's nothing wrong with it now and again, doing like what you did, throwing in some high volume here, just to change it, to
It's
give you
nice.
something different.
Yeah.
Your mind gets a break.
Yeah.
It's something different. Sometimes it's fun to do that. I've done that sometimes. I've trained with some pros in the gym, and I've said, you know what, forget about my techniques. Let me just train with you.
Like when you train with Nasser.
I train with Nasser.
Yeah. You don't tell him what to do.
I don't know. It was like 60 sets of body part. Recently, I trained with Luca Penizzato, who works out of Gold's Gym, and we did, I don't know, I think it was like 25 sets for back. I do 10 sets maybe for back, and I just did it, and it was fun. You know, it's fun.
Right.
Would I train like that all the time? No, but it's fun. So basically, I think at 5 years, start incorporating my techniques. I think that you'll do far better if you're just of average genetics. If you're a genetic superior, just look at the weights you're going to grow.
Yeah, but it's always important, I think, to keep an open mind and try new things and not judge in advance, because it may not work for you. It may work, but if you don't try it, you'll never know. And
You'll
that's
never
the
know.
key.
But to that point, also, I want to say, listen, there's people who have been doing this for a long time, and not just themselves. There are people who have been studying the sport. They've been studying people. They've worked with thousands of people, like I've said, like I've done. And I didn't just work as a trainer, just like, okay, that's how I make my money. I used it as research. I kept notes. You know, I did my research, like, why does this seem to be working? Why is this not? So I read biology, physiology, studies, with proper populations, not people in hospitals. I mean, people who want to be big and strong. And I made sure that what I was saying not only is validated in the trenches or in the gym, but it's also validated by science. So you also want to look to people who've been doing this for a long time, just like the way you would want to learn how to be a brain surgeon from somebody who was a brain surgeon for 30 years.
Experience.
From experience and from knowledge. So all I'm trying to do here is impart my knowledge on people. That's what Jay's channel is all about. Yeah. And that's what we're all about here on Be Built by Broza. So I just hope you guys, keep an open mind. Yeah. Give it a shot. Doesn't work for you, go back to what you're doing before. But as long as you lift and get out there and do your thing.
That's right. All right. Thanks, Mickey.
All right.